That's the final. So with that, I'd like to ask Dr. Sanford to come on up. Again, we'll engage in some conversations this evening, but Dr. Sanford has been at the university now for the last, coming up on 3 years, middle of year 3, right?
As president.
As president, right. So president, but served as a provost, was a professor of philosophy prior to that, and held a number of different roles, but as the leader of the institution, came on in the summer of 2021. And the university has really greatly benefited from Dr. Sanford and his vision. Dr. Sanford has held many posts. He's a published author. He's working on a book right now, Friendship and Virtue, which we'll be very excited to maybe even at JSerra see how that can play into our virtue program that we've been growing with our students and our Dominican sisters. We had had a chance to have some dinner with Dr. Sanford too, just prior to coming out this evening, and kind of continue to be immersed in the vision of the University of Dallas. And after spending even just a dinner with Dr. Sanford, I'm even more convinced of the unity of vision between a place like JSerra and a place like the University of Dallas, and this common goal of, with a lot of joy, not necessarily saying we got to go out and fight the culture war, right? But rather to do something joyfully and embrace truth and embrace goodness and embrace beauty in a way that's very attractive and compelling. And so with that, I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Sanford here. He's here this week for a conference. He's using today, and he spent the day with our humanities students on campus, did a podcast with our Vice President, Pat Reedy. So we've been very, very grateful for you too, Dr. Sanford, and giving back to our students today. So thank you for that. Grateful for you.
Well, I am, yeah, thank you. I almost wore the same tie I had on that video, and I'm really glad I didn't. But thank you, President Meyer. The hospitality, and Vice President Reedy has dedicated his day to Dr. Ellis, our Vice President for Development, and me, opened up this tremendous high school. I mean, it's a remarkable high school. Our day started at 7:15, I think it was, for Mass, and the vitality and the dynamism on this campus, the seriousness with which the students here are dedicating themselves to cultivating their minds and their hearts, and the thriving athletic program. My old friend, athletic director Chris Ledger, you've got a great thing going here. So it's been wonderful to be amongst friends, and as President Meyer was saying, the kinship between what's going on at JSerra and what's going on at the University of Dallas is deep indeed. We do not see ourselves, as President Meyer was saying, as fighting a war and training our students to go out and basically protect themselves from what's going on in this crazy culture. We want our graduates to seize this country by storm. We need a great reawakening in this country. And it needs to be a Catholic reawakening, and it needs to be one. No, that's great. My next trick will be running for a political office.
It's a friendly crowd, if you haven't noticed here. Yeah, it's a very friendly crowd.
Yeah. Well, and you know, not just a great reawakening, not just one that's Catholic, but one that is deeply thoughtful, that's well-formed. And this is where a rich liberal arts education is so vitally important. And one of the ways that I think it's important for you to think of the University of Dallas, and I know not all of you are parents of students at JSerra. Thank you for opening up JSerra to some of our parents, prospective parents and prospective students from other schools and homeschooled. It is the University of Dallas is a university in which you do not need to make compromises. Okay, that's one way to think about what we're dedicated to do, right? A rich Catholic environment, and you saw some elements of that in the video. Like JSerra, we're independent. So we're not run by the diocese. We're not run by a religious community. but we've got a deep relationship with the diocese. There's a Cistercian monastery that is right next to campus. We have the diocesan seminary on campus. We provide formation for the Neo-Catechumenal Way Seminary that's off campus. We've got a Dominican priory on campus. We are building a convent for Nashville Dominican Sisters on campus. Opus Dei is thriving in the area, and other ministries are active and vital. So there's this rich Catholic environment, but you don't need to sacrifice a truly outstanding education. And yes, we emphasize the humanities at the University of Dallas, but the liberal arts are more than the humanities. And this is something that the STEM language forgets, okay? Mathematics, science, those are liberal arts. In fact, they're foundational liberal arts. They're part of what the tradition calls the quadrivium. All of our students are required to take science courses with serious labs, mathematics, and then they stretch into the humanities. So the excellence of the work that we do translates into research being done by our undergraduates. One big difference at the University of Dallas versus a large school is we have full professors who are teaching freshman courses. And if you think about our science majors, in order to graduate with a science degree, you've got to complete a major research project and present it at a professional academic conference in collaboration with your faculty member in order to qualify for graduation. This is one of the reasons why we have one of the highest med school placement rates in the country, a higher med school placement rate than any other Catholic university in the country, and higher than a number of the Ivy League schools. We place our graduates into top-tier law schools at surprising rates. We have the highest conversion rate from undergraduate mathematics majors to a PhD out of any school in the country. Okay? So, yeah, we are really excellent in the humanities, but we're excellent in mathematics, and we're excellent in the sciences. We're one of only 3 Catholic universities that offers terminal degrees in studio arts, right? So we've got this vast arts village. The Catholic University, for no compromises, includes a lot of other elements, and I think we'll talk about some of those. But right out of the gate, I know that so many of the parents here and many of the students, they want their students to thrive as individuals, and they want them to be poised to live successful professional lives. And that is not an either-or proposition, right? Internship programs, opportunities to advance in your studies, and be nurtured within a really rich Catholic environment. We even have NCAA athletics. It's Division III, which I think is better in many respects, but we can talk about that too.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sanford. Maybe we could start with a couple of the questions here, and stay focused a little bit on the personal realm for a moment. You and I have a common bond where we are both leading these Catholic institutions, but not coming at it from a purely professional perspective. Right? You have children. Right? You have a few children, a couple. I have a couple children. In fact, it's very rare that I find myself in circles. Many of you know my wife and I have been blessed with 8 children. And then, Dr. Sanford comes and he went up to us and was like, well, that's great, Rich. You got the nice little family. We have 9. Great. And then we have dinner with my dear friend Ashton Ellis, who came out of the university, and he's like, well, that's great. You guys are doing your little family thing. My wife is expecting our 10th. And so it's pretty rare that you could put 3 guys at a table and we'd have 27 kids between the 3 of us, right? But more than just for shock value, I say that.
It's true. I mean, how often does that happen?
It's pretty rare, right?
Yeah.
But on a serious note, but having these dual roles as a father, right, of large families, of kids of all different kinds of abilities and intellectual capacities and dreams and desires, and at the same time leading institutions of formation ultimately. I'd be curious for you to talk a little bit about how your role as a father, right, has also influenced your vision as a president? And maybe specifically, you could spend some time touching on how does a university uniquely poised to sort of continue the formation of the home, or of a place like JSerra for that matter, right? And maybe even proudly speak of even how University of Dallas does that in a unique way, perhaps.
No, that's a really great question. And my early career was focused especially on teaching, and in some ways, and I still teach. I still get in the classroom sometimes. I started thinking of the presidency like being a professor, where I'm really trying to nurture the individual souls, of my students. But the way in which I approach being a professor is the way I approach being a father. You're endeavoring to cultivate virtue in your children, in your students, across the culture of JSerra or the University of Dallas. And how is it that virtue is nurtured? How do we develop virtue? Well, through practice, through repetition, right? I could go on the virtues, but the main list of virtues that most people call to mind, the cardinal virtues, those are acquired by practice and experience. Universities are especially focused in the classroom on shaping intellectual virtues. Okay? Those are acquired through study, and that's got to be of principal importance at a university as it is within the classrooms here at JSerra. But we are not minds in machines. We are dependent rational animals, organic unities, and you don't just become a person of good character through your aspiration, and you don't get there by study, and you don't get there by prayer divorced from practice, right? And so the way in which I think about the work we do within student culture is how can we set up opportunities for students to really practice the virtues more and more frequently so that they can become virtuous. Now, the goal of life is not simply to be virtuous, right? We don't want to just be able to act in those ways that are really incumbent upon us. The goal of life is to act virtuously, to be active, to engage. And on one of those videos, I use the virtue of magnanimity as being particularly significant. This is a virtue that directs the heart and the mind to do great and glorious things. It's a virtue that we can sometimes, as Catholics, think, boy, is it right and proper for me to really want to be great and to aspire to excellence at the highest level? Is that a kind of violation of humility? St. Thomas Aquinas argues that humility and magnanimity are in fact sister virtues. If you're truly humble, you are acknowledging that the gifts that you have come from God, and you are endeavoring to use those gifts and talents that you have been given to the best of your ability, right? That is to say, to be magnanimous. And if you're really magnanimous and exercising your gifts well, you are developing and drawing from that baseline acknowledgement of your having received whatever gifts and talents, people in your life, and everything else from God. So, in addition to the cardinal virtues and in addition to the intellectual virtues, how do we nurture in our students this right and proper aspiration to do great things, to run multi-billion-dollar corporations? We have a trustee and graduate of the University of Dallas in the back there, Carrie Hayden, who has had a really remarkable career in practice of law, really successful, and built up a flourishing practice here in the, what do you call this area of California?
We call this slice of heaven.
Slice
right
of
here.
heaven.
So some people say Orange County, but we call it slice of heaven.
It was raining when I arrived last night, I'll have you know. I mean, but just as one example, okay? So you put examples before people. You nurture, oftentimes through literature. Freshmen at the University of Dallas are reading epic literature. All of them do this. That provides a vision of greatness. It also raises questions about what is it really to aspire for greatness? That by the time they're reading works in the Christian tradition, they're able to measure the great aspirations of a Hector against the aspirations of David, who had his challenges as well, right? King David. In the Mass sequence, we've been spending some time with David, his triumphs and his follies, right? These literary and scriptural and philosophical and theological anchor points are really important to framing the imagination and cultivating a desire in the heart to do great things, to unite the kingdom as King David did. Can you do that and not commit adultery and murder a guy to cover your tracks, right? So. And if you've done that, can you actually humbly ask for forgiveness? So, I'm answering your question on a kind of a broad level because I'm a philosopher, but translating that into practice takes that kind of high level imagination. And then, okay, how do we do this on the ground? We've got a great dean of students at the University of Dallas, longtime faculty member in our English department. He's in our Hall of Fame. He was a great soccer player at the University of Dallas. And he's got this gift for putting into practice these kinds of aspirations. One of the things that we're moving towards now is a house system on campus where students will be living in the same dorm or the same part of the dorm for their years in residence on campus. Each of these houses will have a particular charism, and there will be healthy competition between different houses. It's something that I think the place is ready for, and just a small example of the way in which we're trying to provide these opportunities to practice the virtues, to cultivate a healthy, holy, ambitious desire to do great things, because this country needs great men and women to reclaim it. We cannot be really well educated and go and hide away and hope that our kids aren't affected by the next generation of debauchery, filth, craziness, whatever's going to come in the next 15 years. Let's grab the corporations. Let's have our graduates running hospital systems. Let's have them involved in big data and lots of other areas so that we can make fundamental changes and make sure that our grandchildren and great-grandchildren are nurtured in an environment that's really going to nurture the virtues.
If I could speak to, okay, applause meter, thank you. I had a very unique personal experience with the University of Dallas recently that I was telling you about. I had a chance to go shortly after Thanksgiving. I was on a brief journey, 5 or 6 day visit to Rome, and I had a chance to spend some time on the campus that you saw in the video here tonight, chat with some of the professors that are working overseas right now. And as impressed as I was, Dr. Sanford, with the sort of the intellectual experience that the university students, the UD students were having within the Rome experience, and all of the things that you saw in the videos, the travel, the experiential learning happening by going into the city of Rome. I was also really impressed by a few of the faculty who live on campus there with the students. A couple of folks who are married living on campus with their own families. And they spent some time talking to us about, we're not only forming the students in the classroom, but we're also with them at meals. We're with them with dinner. We're opening a bottle of wine after dinner's over and the sun is setting, and we're having great conversation. And we're showing young people how to, frankly, responsibly drink and let that be a source of joy and source of great conversation. And as a parent, I found myself thinking, wow, what a refreshing experience, because I think those of us who are parents in the crowd, recognize that our 18-year-olds, when they graduate high school, they're not hopefully the final versions of who they're going to become, right? Hopefully they'll look a little better form than they were at 14 and a little better form than they were at 8, but we're also hoping they're not done. And finding a place during this next cadre of years, of the next 4 or 5 years, to have adults who also have that similar mindset of that this is about intellectual formation, yes, but there's ways that we can continue to form you in a human dimension, right?
No, I'm really glad that you had a chance to experience that. And it doesn't just happen on the Rome campus. And in some ways, the first time I visited the Rome campus and I saw that, I was dean of our undergraduate college, and I thought we need to do more of that on our regular campus, our main campus in Irving. But I discovered we already were in ways that I was not aware of. Professors having groups of students into their homes, dining with the family, getting to know the kids, faculty members inviting students to extended conversations beyond the classroom. And it's not uncommon at almost any time during the day to see a faculty member sitting down somewhere in conversation with 3 or 4 students. And then it's very common to see students sitting down in conversation with each other. And what are they conversing about? Well, they might be conversing about how the 49ers are going to lose, but I'm just kidding.
That's Northern California. That's a whole other
kidding.
country, so you're safe down here.
I am a Bills fan, and I feel like I'm just in professional football purgatory for the rest of my life. But oftentimes the students are engaged in extended conversations from what they are studying about in the classroom. And here's one of the things that I think it's easy to miss. So faculty members are modeling what it is to have a good conversation, what it is to enjoy a glass of wine, what it is to raise their own kids. And it's really healthy for college students to be in conversation with people who aren't just 18 to 22 years old. But it's also really important for them to be in rich conversation with their peers who are in college. And so the effect of having all of our students work through a common body of texts in this core curriculum, so it's roughly a 2-year core curriculum, 2 years of majors, although many students start in a particular major right out of the gate, but almost 50% of our students delay selecting a major, which is really helpful for them because they figure out what they want to get passionate about and explore. We encourage them to take advantage of our robust internship opportunities early in their years because we find it actually pushes back against the anxiety of thinking they have to have it all figured out from day one. But the students really cultivate friendships because they've become passionate about what they hold dear. And this is the way friendship works. C.S. Lewis has a wonderful way of putting this where he contrasts the love of friendship with the love of romantic love. And in romantic love, the lovers are interested in each other, like almost exclusively. They're gazing into each other's eyes. They're into each other. Whereas the love of friendship is characterized always by a third thing, right? Something they hold in common, whether it's athletics or one of the examples that C.S. Lewis uses is a common love for stamp collecting. That's less common these days than maybe in 1942. But the highest things that you can be concerned about are matters of the intellect and matters of our theological or spiritual well-being. And our students all have that in common. And some of you I know are alumni of the University of Dallas. You still have that in common with current students at the University of Dallas. And I often find myself at an alumni event and see new friendships arise around things that were studied 30 years ago with two alumni in the same area who didn't know they were in the same area, who may have graduated 5, 7 years apart, right? But they're anchored by this passion to really know what the truth is and get to the bottom of it. And our students learn how not to take offense when somebody says, I think you're wrong, and here's why, right? They learn to argue. And our faculty are not hesitant to say, I think you're wrong. I think this is a bad paper. I think you need to study harder. Here's your C. I never had a C before. Well, here's your C. Those occasions take place within the context of friendship as well, right? And so our students learn how to argue without quarreling. They learn how to take constructive criticism. They know they can trust their peers. They know they can trust their faculty. And they become sharpened, right? Iron sharpens iron through this process. And unfortunately, I think that's becoming relatively uncommon at many universities, where you're just not able to articulate your disagreement with another, or a point of view that's not in favor. We're all about intellectual engagement and debate. This is a chunk of what we mean when we say that we're the Catholic University for independent thinkers. So we want students to think for themselves, to stand on their own feet, to always be ready for a reason for what they believe, as St. Peter tells us we need to be.
Yeah, and as you said too, your ability to engage in that kind of a healthy dialogue of debate or argument too, the success of that, your ability to do that rests ultimately too in the depth of friendship that you share, right, with those across the table from you, whether it's a professor to student or student to student or peers, right? I find myself, as I hear you reflecting on some of these comments, Dr. Sanford, I also find myself thinking about our high school students who are going through the process of thinking about the next step, thinking about university life, where they want to go to school, where they should apply, and we have there's a lot of noise in it, or advice, if you will, to phrase it positively, in this space of, well, where should you go if you want X out of life? And I'm not going to use any specific university or college's names now, but maybe we'll speak in broad terms of talking about Brand X School. Brand X School would be the Brand X School that has sort of a wide brand name recognition that seemingly just opens doors because of the name, right? Independent of size. Maybe it's a big school, maybe it's a small school. And maybe you could spend a few minutes commenting on the importance or the lack of importance of the brand experience, and more on the substance of what the college experience looks like. And maybe maybe I can tee you up with a comment that I read the other day. I was reading an article on the college selection process, and this phrase has been really it's been heavy on my heart the last 4 or 5 days. And it was where you go to college isn't as important as how you go to college, and that's really stuck with me, right? And that's not to suggest that you can't go to a top tier, top 10 university, top 5 university, et cetera, whatever Brand X School is, and have a great experience. But I think sometimes our culture can get really fixed on the name, and loses track of, okay, that's great that you got an X brand school, but now you really need to spend some time thinking about how you're going to become formed, right? In that experience, and how do you seek out means of formation? And I think we recognize that certain colleges and universities, you have a chance to hit the dartboard in terms of what you choose to study or do with the professors you choose to engage in, a lot that will align with maybe a family's values, or inculcated the values that have been inculcated throughout a young person's life, than if you go to other schools where you have to really search hard. Right? So perhaps you could just offer some thoughts generally on that, and then also maybe specifically to the University of Dallas experience.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll be careful to not be too specific where I shouldn't be in comparisons that are drawn. But one way to answer your question very briefly is to say that there are many schools that you can go to that have cachet in one way or another, where you can receive an excellent education. At the University of Dallas, you will necessarily receive an excellent education. And that is to say, you don't need a path that has been cut through the education. I needed that where I went to college. I went to a name brand Catholic university, and was just shocked by some of the things that I saw there. It was part of my inspiration to, when the opportunity arose, to dedicate myself to leading a Catholic university. Shocked in the sense that, day one in the dorm, somebody knocked on my door and said, hey, come on down, our RA is really cool. He's got a pony keg and he's showing pornographic movies. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And sitting in a theology class and having a debate with my teacher and being the only one in my classroom insisting on Mary's perpetual virginity, and being derided by my theology professor at this school. So what was probably the saddest thing that I noticed there was, Mass was full at the beginning of my freshman year, and after about a month, there was just a remnant of people who would go to Sunday Mass. So that seemed like a betrayal, right? Now I was blessed to have a faculty member who identified me, who was why I went there on an academic scholarship, who said, okay, you're going to avoid all of these professors. I'm going to make sure you get into this class, and then we're going to get into this class. And what a blessing to have that guide. And I don't think I would have lost my faith without that, but I would have had a much worse education. Okay, so that does not happen at the University of Dallas. You've got, or another way to say it is, you've got a faculty full of people who will be like that professor who became my mentor, and everyone wants you to have this excellent education, and you cannot hide from the core curriculum. You prospective students should know it takes some boldness and daring to step into this education, because we do expect a lot from you, and you won't be able to find, like, tell me the easy classes so that I don't have to work too hard. Okay, that's not one of the pathways that you'll discover. So just be forewarned. So if you're strong enough and daring enough and to be all you can be, like the Marine Corps. Okay, so there are a lot of reasons to be attracted to a college. My heart is stirred by certain college football programs, and I get the attraction to big name, major program. In fact, Texas is just full of schools that really leverage that brand recognition well. We have a great rugby team, and we competed for the national championship 2 years ago. We didn't win, but we competed. You would not have found that game on television, okay? And that's just fine, because our students are competing at a high level, and they're being pushed. So, yeah, we don't have the brand recognition of Harvard, right, obviously. But we provide the education that, at least initially, built Harvard's reputation. And if you've followed the news at all in the last month, Harvard's not looking really fantastic, right? But I can see a lot of families nonetheless saying, I want my son or daughter to go to Harvard because I know that they'll get well connected and they'll be set up for life. And now that's not always true, but I get that. I get that that attraction. And the fact of the matter is that we have a network of alumni who are very successful, who will provide opportunities to move into careers. So it's not like that's missing at the University of Dallas, but we don't have it in droves the way that Harvard does. But what is the one thing that's most important about your college experience? It's getting an education, a real education, one that is forming your mind, one that is forming your soul, one that is preparing you to live a life of real, genuine human flourishing, one that is preparing you to lead in the ways that I was describing before. But the vocation of the student, which anyone who goes to college needs to embrace, okay? This is your vocation for the next 4 years and maybe beyond if you're going to go on and get a PhD. You need to embrace that vocation and all that entails. And by seeing this as your calling, and instead of seeing all of the externalities of what happens at many universities as why you're there, okay? You will gain so much more, and you will be in a position to exercise tremendous influence for the greater glory of God as a result of that. You'll be a better husband, a better wife, a better mother, a better father. We've had 12 bishops graduate from the University of Dallas, which is remarkable for a school as young as we are. And it's because they were so well formed that they were identified as leaders, right? It's the same mark, the same phenomenon that leads to other graduates who rise up and become CEOs or top attorneys or whatever their calling is, right? It's the mark of a really excellent education that's been fully embraced because you've gone there in order to receive it, not in order to go to the football game on Saturday afternoon and after drinking throughout the morning and then throughout the evening. And you might just leave college integrated and not dissipated through the kind of hazards of debauchery that, frankly, are on offer at a lot of places. Not that University of Dallas students are all saints, but all of the pressure is in the direction of living righteously. And that's where the encouragement is. Human beings have free will, but it makes a big difference to be in an environment where that's the encouragement. But again, from the perspective of the student, and I would encourage parents to think this way too, okay? Choose a university in which you see your son, your daughter, and you prospective students, where you see yourself really embracing what it is to be a student, that calling that you have, and then go after it with all the energy that you have.
Thank you, Dr. Sanford. Well, let's do this. We have. I was joking about midnight, but so we actually, if you'd like to stay, Dr. Sanford's committed to stay till midnight. I'm going to go home to my wife and children around 9 o'clock to make sure they get to bed. But we have about another 10 or 15 minutes or so, and actually I would be really interested to open the floor up to some questions or comments from the crowd that we could comment on or go a little bit deeper on for a few minutes here. So I'm curious where can we begin? Yes, Siegel.
Dr. Sanford, can you tell us a little bit more about how you find mass attending Catholic faculty who support your mission in its details?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why we have not rapidly expanded in size is because we need to be selective in who we identify as faculty members. Now, it's not the case that every faculty member is a Catholic. We insist that every faculty member, regardless of their faith background, the majority of them, of course, are Catholic. But frankly, in my experience, I have seen Catholics be far more subversive, at other institutions where I've studied and worked. Not Franciscan University, so, but I worked at another place. Do far more damage, right? So you've got to, as part of the application process, you need to be able to articulate the mission and express how you will support it. So Ex Corde Ecclesiae, this apostolic constitution that St. John Paul II issued in 1990, argues that in fact there is a role for non-Catholic faculty at universities. He sees a positive good in that, but insists that you must support, actively support the mission of the institution. So sussing that out takes time, and we don't want to just grab faculty members. Some disciplines, it's harder in some disciplines than others to identify those individuals. I'm now the president, so job number one for me was academic leaders who have the prudence to do that work well, of identifying faculty members who should be there and identifying potential faculty members who shouldn't be there, overseeing the rank and tenure process, and then having courage when it's required to make hard choices. And it's not a formulaic approach. A lot of Protestant universities and colleges issue faith statements that you can sign on. That's no guarantee either. It's something that requires vigilance and ongoing cultural formation for the faculty, so that they can deepen their understanding of the Catholic identity of the university, and then holding people accountable to that, and letting people go once you've done that work and taking care of the other elements. But it's a great question. Thank you for asking.
We had an interesting experience at JSerra a number of years ago where we were rethinking through our application process and how we vet and how we recruit and bring faculty and others onto the campus. And we added a component of the application process where they had to read our school's mission statement, our philosophy statements, and write a short essay of a page or two reflecting upon that and their personal experience that would allow them to come and advance this stated mission of ours. And I have to tell you that whenever we're hiring at the school, and I get the application packages because I'll interview any final candidate for any position on campus, the very first thing I look at is I skip the resume, I skip the application form application, the recommendation, all of those things, and I jump right to the essay. It's the very first thing that I
always
read.
make sure it's first in my packet.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
so
very,
I don't even have to flip.
well, see, it's so bad. That's a good point. We're going to hire so much more effectively this second cycle here with all that page flipping that I've been wasting all my time. But there's something too, like it's really, in some ways, and it's not a foolproof system, but in some ways you can tell when people are just putting down language that sounds flowery on paper, and then you can tell when people are really connected to mission at least. Now that doesn't mean that they'll be the best person professionally in the particular, but at least it answers a little bit sometimes that mission component, right? And I echo your sentiment too about some areas are easier to find people who may be more aligned in the mission with others, and as leaders of institutions, that becomes that next challenge of how do you weigh that professional expertise and that connectedness with mission without wanting to give on either. Right.
Yeah, and there are some societies that are building up. There's a new society of Catholic natural scientists, which has been helpful to identify people while they're still in graduate school and begin to cultivate a relationship with them and say, hey, I think you'd love to teach at the University of Dallas. Come check it out. So, over time, I want to get better and better at that to not make it seem like such a crapshoot as it sometimes does, where I've got to find this faculty member. Where am I going to find them, right? But if you've got your eyes on people several years in the making, that's much easier. You know.
Other comments or questions that we can grab? And I'll rephrase the question again. So ask your question, I'll rephrase it for the benefit of everybody.
So people looking at colleges now want an authentic Catholic university. What are some easy markers to look for? And our two oldest are at college age, Catholic university, I won't name it, and it's the same story that you gave, although it's, I will say the world, 2020, and iPhone, all of that, right? Give us things that we didn't know. We feel like we failed them and went in and they battled. Our son had Notre Dame law, and when I tell you battle, he's a fellow now for Alliance Defending Freedom. And he didn't, that was not his personality, but if you're a Catholic, even on a Catholic university, some universities, it's tough. So, and you're on our short list of universities for our next one coming up. And her brother and sister are so protective of her. So I give you 30 seconds to think about it. I want to call you. Newman Center was something that we could look for. And,
The Newman Guide list, you mean? Yeah.
yes, if they have a gender affirming club, not
Yeah, right.
particularly Catholic. I mean, we didn't know.
Sure.
I don't think that was a thing then with our oldest. But I also want to compliment JSerra because our son at Notre Dame Law, he said, Mom, who is this Chris Harrington? I get an email once a semester to all the grad students looking for people that are willing to come and think about teaching.
That's right.
He said that is an authentically Catholic high school. So kudos.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So for the benefit of who are the millions who are streaming abroad, listening, the essence of the question was what may be the markers that may help identify Catholic universities, colleges that are striving to authentically live their mission.
I mean, the Newman Guide identifies some already, right? You can ask a Catholic university, does every member of your theology department have the mandatum? That is permission from the bishop to teach. You can ask about how many students go to Mass? How many students go to daily Mass? Do you have Eucharistic adoration? Those are important things. Here's a negative thing you can look to. Does that Catholic university that you're looking at have a vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion? Is there an office of that? Okay. Now, the Catholic tradition is predicated on a deep respect for the dignity of each person, but we're taught to see unity before we see difference, and I do think that there is an ideological difference between what's happening within broadly the wokeism and a authentic fidelity to the Catholic mission. So if there is such an office that is privileging DEI over almost anything else, because the way DEI offices often function at universities that are Catholic or not is they exercise a kind of veto power over hiring. And if you were to violate that, then you can't move forward. So it's maybe not a full safe approach, but I would suggest that you ought to be skeptical of any institution that has a DEI office and puts that forward in its self-description, because there is an ideological impediment to really advancing what should be the foundational mission of the institution. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying, oh yeah, so Catholics are all in on homogeneity and we don't care about intercultural dialogue. That's not at all what I'm saying. So I hope that that's clear.
Yeah, and maybe I'd offer another thought or two. We've had 3 children graduate through. Well, we've had 4 children graduate through JSerra. We have a 5th graduating this year. Our 3 oldest have now graduated through college. Our 4th is a sophomore at college right now. And they've been in different, those who've graduated from high school have all found themselves in sort of a college culture, different places with different flavors and feels. But maybe some other markers when I think about, as a parent, how we help our young people, our sons and our daughters make decisions, are asking some of the questions of okay, well, how else, even if it's a public university you're going to, and I want, because I want to be quick to suggest that the University of Dallas or some of the schools my children have been to, it may not be the right fit for everybody, right? Like the only university in the world that can form people isn't the University of Dallas, right? And I know Dr. Sanford will be the first person to say that too, although maybe not as forcefully as I would.
It's true.
Right?
It's
right?
true.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So there's great work being done at other places. There's great work being done at public universities. There's great work being done at secular universities. But your phrase of, but at a place like UD, you will necessarily get a good education versus these other places, you're going to have to work really hard to seek it out and cut your own path to do so. But at those places, there are things like focus, right, students. There are Newman centers. Like these are opportunities that you can be thinking about if our son or our daughter is set on brand X school or a school that's not have the kind of ethos as a UD. Well, be encouraging looking into these other dimensions, the way that they can stay connected with their faith and the formative experience throughout their college years too. And I think too, as a parent, it's important to remember that many times we're not deciding for our 18-year-old children where they're going to school. Like this conversation has been phrased of, well, in many ways, well, this is where you're going to go to school, or this is why the parents should, but that's oftentimes not going to be our choice. Now, maybe if we hold the purse strings and we say, well, you could choose where you want to go, but these are the two schools I'm paying for, that's one way to influence your son or your daughter, right? The perfect situation is they choose to go to the place where you think would be best for their formation, and you're happy to support them in doing that. There's a bit of a psychology to how you get to that point. If you don't get to that point, though, we still have a responsibility to help guide our sons and our daughters beyond their high school years so they can have a great formative experience regardless of where they choose, right? But these are important questions to be thinking about because the culture has the tendency to focus on the brand experience, or the brand name, I should say, while dismissing greatly what that experience is going to look like and how to have that great experience.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. That's a great set of points.
Yes.
I agree that faculty is probably one of the most important things in considering where your kids are going, but it's also the student body. Mm-hmm. And because these are their peers, these are who they're going to be influenced by. As much as we like to think all our staff is influencing them, we all know it's their peers that are really there too. So what are you looking for a University of Dallas student? I mean, if it's just grades at some of these universities, it's grades and SATs, you're not going to get that kind of student body that I think you're talking about. So what is it that you're looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Can I rephrase the question more briefly for our audience members at home? Again, criteria for choosing a student. Grades are certainly important. Test scores are certainly important. But those aren't necessarily the only markers by which you would likely evaluate the right culture fit for University of Dallas students. So what other dimensions are you looking at when you're trying to bring together a student body that's best reflective of embracing the UD culture and frankly probably furthering it and deepening it in many ways too?
Yeah, so I like that question because we get so fixated on grades. Or I had this classmate in high school who must have told me at different times, maybe 15 times, just how high his IQ was. And okay. So, and he was a super underachiever. Really high test scores, right? And got into someplace. I will take any day a kid with passion, a hunger to learn, and an expressed desire to be part of a community like the University of Dallas. So it's a hurdle for some people, but we require essays to be written to reflect on the mission and how you see yourself contributing to the University of Dallas, why you think this is the right place for you. And our admissions team read those carefully. And that's an important part of the selection process. Another way to come at your question, instead of getting all political like I did the last time, the earlier question is, is, sit in a class, right? And we see a lot from the students who come and visit us too. They're not always admitted, but they often are. But some like real life interaction. So molding that class, we want to suss out and give them opportunity to describe themselves as, if they've got great grades and test scores and great character and a real desire to be there, that's great. If they've got pretty good grades and pretty good test scores and aspirations to be part of a really serious community of learners and aspire to elevate their aspirations, and we can see character there in other ways as well. That's oftentimes those are people who end up really successful because they've overcome some challenges. And yeah, great question. The point about coming to class and visiting as a way to tell, whether that's at UD or any other place, and without a doubt, there are other places that can be good, but you can learn a lot by sitting in the classroom and listening to the conversation there, and then talking to actual students and seeing what they're like. And are these naturally happy people, or are they angst-ridden and feel like they're uncomfortable in their own skin and just want to get back to their rooms and plug in to social media, right? What are they like? I know it takes time to do that as parents, but spend some time in a classroom at a school you're considering and talking to the students.
Let's take one more question or comment, right? Alan, yeah, go ahead.
So, quick question. What I'm hearing is, there's what, 200 Catholic schools in America, maybe 250, whatever. And it seems like that the term Catholic is now being watered down, right? It's becoming Catholic in name only. Play it out 5-10 years. Where do you see a inflection? Well, what do you see in 5 to 10 years for some of these schools that today call themselves Catholic? Mm-hmm. And do you see an inflection point that's going to either rally them back toward, their foundation, or is it just going to trickle down the path that they're going?
Yeah. Good question, and I'll try not to wax over long on this, but I saw initially my career trajectory as being in one of those schools that have fallen away from their identity and laboring to help bring them back. And I think there's still hope. That hope is embedded in some ways in the power that was granted or acknowledged, I should say, in Ex Corde Ecclesiae, this apostolic constitution that St. John Paul II issued. And then the U.S. Conference of Bishops issued their reflections and refinements and applications of that 10 years later, which include the explicit acknowledgement of the ability to say you're not going to be able to call yourself Catholic anymore. Because whether you're independent or diocesan or run by a religious community, the ability to call yourself a Catholic high school or a Catholic university canonically is grounded in the local ordinary's acknowledgement of your Catholicity. Okay, so bishops could play a huge role in this. Bishop Kevin Rhodes of the Fort Wayne South Bend Diocese recently stepped in when St. Mary's defiantly made explicit their desire to bring in transgendered women to an all-women's school, right? And he said, no, that's not appropriate. And there was just the faintest hint of bringing down the hammer. and they reversed course. And I mean, that was just like the whisper of it. It was like a tiny little hammer, right? There's a lot more authority than that. So another way I look at this is our strategic plan is orienting us to be, in every respect, the premier Catholic liberal arts university in the nation, right? And I'm an Aristotelian in this, in pretty much everything. And what I mean by that is, and I recognize there are ways in which that end has not been fully actualized yet in the University of Dallas, but the substance is there, right? When you think about the education that you need, and the Catholic formation is there, and I think some of those bells and whistles are helpful as well, building up a robust, even more robust network of alumni. And so I want other Catholic universities that have slipped away to look at the University of Dallas and say, man, those guys are killing it. And I have a friend who's on the board of the College of Holy Cross in Worcester, and he came on a pilgrimage that I was part of to Guadalupe, Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. The University of Dallas is consecrated to Our Lady of Guadalupe, and we have a shrine on campus. And so he was telling me about this conversation. He said, JJ, I was sitting in my board meeting at College of Holy Cross, which, if you haven't heard of it, it's considered near Ivy League, if not Ivy League. And he said, we spent 10 minutes with our board chair describing the University of Dallas's success in making the case that you can be really excellent academically and vibrantly Catholic. Why can't we do that successfully at the College of Holy Cross? So that's some inside baseball, but it was gratifying for me to hear that we're being noticed by trustees at this very prestigious Catholic university for something that we've been working really hard to show that we do in spades, which is combine a deep commitment to the church with truly excellent intellectual formation and orientation towards success. It can be done. The Land O'Lakes Accord was predicated on thinking it can't be done. And that's when this divorce happened. And so a lot of Catholic universities are terrified of embracing their Catholic identity because people will think, oh, they're not serious about academics anymore. And that is a lie, and we're proving it to be a lie on a daily basis.
Well, with that reflection, we're gonna wrap up this evening. But I do want to offer just a few words of thanks as well. First to Dr. Sanford, thank you for not only this evening, but for spending the morning with our students, for taking the time to do a podcast with Mr. Reedy here, so that we can kind of go out and share that message in a different way.
It truly has been a pleasure.
Yeah, so we're grateful to have you, Julie. If you're still here, is Julie still here? Who's helping with coordinating with Charity, who's also back there. Charity and Julie, thank you for helping to put together this evening. Also, Ashton Ellis, who's a dear friend and who recently came on the University of Dallas, spent some time this afternoon with our college counselors as well to speak and help share some of the vision of the University of Dallas with our college counselors, so they in turn can be having conversations with our students. And again, whether it's the University of Dallas or this idea is helping us to promote, right, that these are questions that we should be asking and encouraging our young people at school to be thinking about their next steps beyond JSerra. So thank you to Ashton for coming out and spending time with our college counselors today. We really look forward to having you back anytime on campus. All right.
Thank you. I look forward to being back.
All right, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. All right, God bless everybody. Go Lions.